This video is probably going to earn me a fair few hate comments, but I think we need to address the elephant in the room. And that is to openly discuss the dark side of a guy who's been in the news prominently this week. I'm Robert J. Simpson. I'm a film and cultural historian. So basically, I want to talk about a fella who's in his mid-50s, white, an Oscar winner, actor, musician, about whom there are rumours of inappropriate interactions with teenagers that just won't go away. I could easily be talking about Jared Leto, who is at the centre of a documentary this week exploring allegations about bad behaviour going back decades, but no, I'm actually thinking about the late Irish singer-songwriter Glen Hansard. And yes, if you've seen the outpouring of grief over the last 24 and 48 hours online and in the press, you may not have come across this information before, and it's not comfortable listening. So look, I want to first address the issue with discussing this just after Glen has died as the result of a motorbike accident at the age of 56 in Dublin. There's a school of thought that you shouldn't talk ill of the dead. I made a video about this fairly recently, and you will know if you've seen that it's just not something that I agree with personally. Concerns are valid at all times, whether someone is alive or dead. Just because someone has just died, it doesn't mean that you should keep your concerns or your criticisms to yourself. When people are telling you that they have experienced abusive or predatory behaviour at the hands of someone, then they have a right to be heard, and those of us that are in a position to amplify that have an obligation. There are other reasons why I think that we'll hear more about this with regards to Hansard, but I'll come back to that in a bit. One of my jobs over the years has been to provide obituaries in the media whenever celebrities and creatives have passed. But my job also isn't just to provide a whitewashed hagiography. It's to assess both the highs and the lows. And in this case, Hansard's greatest success is inextricably linked to the issue of predatory behaviour. So many of my friends have posted about their sadness on hearing of his death, and there's no denying that Glen Hansard's music touched people. Personally, I loved his voice, and I loved the songs that he put out there with The Frames and The Swell Season. It was powerful. But being an amazing artist doesn't put you beyond scrutiny, and that also doesn't mean that you can't also be a problematic person. Back in 2007, I saw Once, the film he made with Margarita Irglova, in which they play a couple of buskers who meet and fall in love on the streets of Dublin. I adored the soundtrack and had it on repeat for months afterwards. I remember distinctly the PR around the film and the life-mirroring art angle with Irglova and Hansard ending up in a relationship for a period too. Ugh, I thought that was so romantic, and I'm sure most of you did. But then I started learning about the things that didn't sit with me and which have hindered my enjoyment of the film and the music ever since. I learned about the 17-year age gap between the couple, how that relationship officially started when Irglova was probably 18, but how it actually had its genesis long before. So there is an officially sanctioned and publicised version of this narrative, and it's the one that people are going to cite to me to justify their relationships as being above board. They'll tell me that they were both consenting adults and that nothing happened until she was 18. They'll also remind you that they were still recording and performing together 20 years later and clearly had a great deal of affection for each other still. But I have to ask, what does grooming look like to you? How does it affect the decisions of a child or a young person? And how might it manifest itself years after the event? Irglova and Hansard met when, according to Hansard, she was just 12. Irglova says that she fell in love with him when she was 13, that they started hanging out and making music together. Hansard said that he was falling in love with her for a long time before they made Once, but that she was, and I quote, just a kid. Many of these comments were recorded and published during the promotion for Once, and on not one occasion did I see a journalist questioning the appropriateness of a 30-something-year-old man spending years with this young teen and then forming a romantic and sexual relationship as soon as they reached the age that put it into a legally accepted realm. Nobody pushed to see if that relationship might have had a fuzzier start than the one that was being trotted out in the press junkets. Now, Irglova is still here, so she could clarify things, I suppose, but she was also immersed in an intense emotional relationship, probably her first from the age of 12, and was smitten by the time that she was 13, and that relationship has been very important in terms of her professional career. Hansard was given a position of trust over her, a mentoring that clearly crossed boundaries. I think there's something that she said in an interview that's quite telling. She said, "I felt a sense of belonging around Glen. He always treated me as an equal, that I was on a par with him. He gave me the freedom to just be. I fell in love with Glen instantly when I was 13, and because at that time a relationship was out of the question, wasn't allowed to exist, I felt it was just pure love." Hansard, on the other hand, talks about the relationship as an inevitability. He says, "Of course we fell into each other's arms. It was a very necessary part of our friendship, but I think we both concluded that that wasn't what we really wanted to do." Now, at best, I think that this was inappropriate and unconventional. At worst, it reeks of grooming and abusive tactics. And then they went and made a film which enabled them to work together every single day. Hansard had actually recommended Irglova for the part of the girl, and then he himself was cast as the guy after Cillian Murphy left the project. And then that film became a smash hit, and they went and won an Oscar together, and their careers were made. Irglova's biography on her own website betrays an awareness that their relationship is problematic. It was then, and it would very much be seen as such today. She now suggests that she didn't actually meet Glen until 2004 when she was 16. That's 3 years later than the previously documented history. That same biography, while also naming other romantic partners, completely skirts over the fact that Hansard and Irglova were romantically involved. And that's something that's undeniable. They made 2 films about this, one fictional, which they heavily promoted, and then there's another non-fiction film. This raises questions at the very least. Why is there this rewriting of history if not to obfuscate the truth? Is it because of a fear of cancellation? Hansard was undeniably a talented singer-songwriter. He was a visible supporter of various charities, especially ones relating to the homeless in Dublin, and I've seen lots of comments from people in the music industry and fans who have positive experiences from meeting and working with him. He was undoubtedly talented and charismatic, and he was probably lovely to people as well. But it is also possible to be 2 things at the same time. To be lovely to your friends and fans and at the same time be predatory with an unhealthy interest in people considerably younger than you. And for years, rumours have circulated about Hansard's interest in teenagers. I remember seeing comments online a couple of years after Once came out, and when Me Too became a thing, and people started exposing the situation of the Irish music scene, there were more comments that were posted publicly on different forums and social media channels. Women were talking about their experiences with him, of a reputation of being too physical, of passes that he made, and more. I recall seeing the posts and wondering when an expose would follow. And the suspicion and the speculation has long been that Hansard was able to silence his critics because of the power that he held and because of the threat of legal action. I've spent the last couple of days digging through old forums and social media posts, and whilst there is admittedly a lot of vagueness and evidence that some posts have been removed, it's hard to ignore those comments entirely, particularly when you're aware of the shocking nature of what he actually admitted to during the PR for Once. There are multiple suggestions that Hansard had a particular romantic interest in teenagers. There are allegations of groping fans. And in the last couple of days, there's been a number of people who have claimed to have witnessed Hansard's inappropriate behaviour firsthand. And every time someone says something about it, there's a dozen Hansard fans shouting down those who dare question his motivations and his behaviour. I think that one of the reasons that people in the past haven't been super specific is probably because of the laws of libel and defamation that exist in the UK and Ireland. Regardless of the truth about what happens to you in your life and the people that you have those experiences with, making an accusation without solid supporting evidence is treacherous, and all the much harder when you're up against someone as fetid as Hansard was and is. But with Hansard's death, the libel and defamation risk goes. And I suspect that people will start coming forward and putting their head above the parapet, sharing their first-hand experiences, and some of them may well have actual documentary evidence too. Many of those people have been trying to be heard for years, but living in fear of retaliation, lawyers, and Hansard's fans. There will be much anger that this is rearing its head again, but honestly, I have to ask, if this was one of your kids or your friends in a situation like this with a much older man, how would you feel? If you've been angry at any point about stories you've heard about the likes of Jared Leto, Russell Brand, R. Kelly, Rolf Harris, Neil Gaiman, etc., but you're giving Glen Hansard a free pass, then I think you need to reconsider. We're not talking about something that happened in the 1960s or 70s, so we can't argue that the moral culture was vastly different in the mid-2000s, because I assure you, I lived through it, it wasn't. We were very aware of what was and wasn't appropriate. We'd seen celebrity sex scandals. We were having conversations around age gaps. And I think that we should be listening to the voices of those who have been trying to tell us for years that something is wrong rather than shutting them down. And what some of those voices have been telling us, and what the media has been reluctant to speak out about, is that Glen Hansard groomed a child and hid it in plain sight within a film that won an Oscar. And none of us who love that film want to admit that we've been complicit in normalising that predatory behaviour.